Hello and welcome to the fourth in our series of telemobility virtual roundtables presented by the USDOT Telemobility University Transportation Center. I'm Hani Mahmassani. I'm director of the Northwestern University Transportation Center and the director as well of the Telemobility UTC, which is a partnership of Northwestern, UC Berkeley, and University of Texas in Austin. The Telemobility Center is concerned with the impact of information and communication technologies on virtual engagement and the interaction between virtual and in-person activities, and ultimately the impact on travel behavior and the demand for travel. Today, we're going to be addressing e-commerce and omnichannel retailing and the impact that we have seen on, again, on consumer behavior as well as on the impact on travel demand. To address these questions, we have an outstanding panel with us today from the heart of the e-commerce world. We have Joan King with us, who is Senior Vice President for e-commerce and international at Crate & Barrel, where she is responsible for development and implementation of e-commerce strategy and sort of the digital experience across the offerings that Crate & Barrel has. We also have with us Raj Narayanaswamy, who's General Manager of Operations at Wayfair. Raj has experience in retail strategy, operations, analytics, and technology with a special focus on the sort of North American management team. Wayfair has seen tremendous growth in e-commerce, I believe, during this period, and we are very interested in hearing, what the experience has been there. We also have with us Doug Hine, who is Vice President of E-commerce and Integrated Payment Strategy, and serves as a lead for e-commerce markets at Elavon. And he will tell us more about what Elavon does, because it may not be a household name, like Crate & Barrel, for example. And this is because e-commerce actually is, has so much behind the scenes that is taking place. And Elavon is one of these companies that enable these developments. And to complete our panel today, we have Dave Spear, who is a senior industry consulting leader for the retail vertical at Teradata, a company that has been a partner to us here at the Northwestern University Transportation Center. So we have, again, an outstanding panel that's going to help us explore what the developments in e-commerce from their vantage point. So the format we're going to follow today is we have some questions that we're going to put to our panelists. Some questions will be addressed by all the panelists. Other questions may go to one or the other panelist. And of course, the panelists can intervene at any point if they want to add something to somebody else's question. Throughout, though, we will be taking questions from our audience. As you know, Zoom has a Q&A feature. We are monitoring this Q&A feature, so we ask you to enter your questions through that feature, and then we will bring them to the attention of the panelists, primarily in the latter part of the webinar today, but we may bring them up sooner if you have a clarification or whatever. Our Senior Associate Director, Brett Johnson, is going to be monitoring the Q&A chat, the Q&A line, and we'll be interacting with the questions, and then we'll be coordinating, presenting these to our panelists today. So let's start with our first question today. Of course, we know that consumers turned to e-shopping in a major way during the initial COVID lockdown, and they have continued to do so well into the recovery. We know that people are spending money on home improvement, spending money on goods as opposed to experiences because travel has become more difficult. We know that inventories are low and are being replenished. Of course, we also know that e-commerce had been gaining progressively on in-store long before COVID, and that COVID has accelerated those trends. So the question that I have to all of you, from your vantage point, is the increase that we've seen in e-commerce simply a continuation, or maybe even an acceleration of the pre-pandemic trends, or has there been a market shift, a watershed mark, if you wish, both quantitatively, but also quantitatively in consumer behavior towards online purchasing during the pandemic? And we can start with Joan for that question.
Sure. Hello. Nice to meet you all virtually. What we've seen in our business for our category is not just unique to our business, but I think our entire category has seen that the pandemic created a higher consumer demand for home goods as more and more people were kind of finding themselves at home, spending more time cooking, spending more time kind of in their home than ever before. That really has driven demand in a way that that no one would have predicted necessarily. And not being able to go to the store for some period of those months really just accelerated adoption of e-commerce in a way that that would have taken 10 years for it to accelerate at the pace that it has. And we, even as the stores reopened and as more and more of life resumed, we're not fully back to normal yet, but as we kind of have gotten closer and closer to returning in some areas, we haven't seen those trends let up. There's definitely kind of a piece of digital adoption, particularly in e-commerce, that will be ongoing. I don't see that even when the economy opens up and everything fully returns to normal. I think the impact on e-commerce and the adoption that customers have in the convenience that they found in buying online is going to remain.
Thank you. Raj, you want to take this question?
Sure. Hey, very happy to be here. Thanks for having us all here. I would like to actually echo very closely to John's sentiment here. The trend is actually pretty interesting. Like you would automatically expect that categories that are in high demand, like office desks or any kind of office furniture within the home, would be in high demand, right? But that is not that's not the only categories that we actually saw and accelerate in terms of growth. We actually saw the entire assortment actually accelerate, and this assortment, we believe that is there for a foreseeable period, right? It's actually kind of brought us, let's say maybe 3 to 5 years worth of growth in terms of customers' mind share towards e-commerce and how they've actually treated e-commerce, especially in the home goods space. I would like to say that there's actually an acceleration of about 3 to 5 years in a short span of about 9 months. That's exactly what we are seeing. So the trends will not get reversed. Like we are not going to go back to a pre-COVID environment where how we actually grew categories year over year. I think our trends are here to stay. Maybe not as accelerated as what it was in the last 9 months, but they're here to stay.
Thank you, Raj. Doug, you want to take this?
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's great to be here. Appreciate the invite. It's great to be with you guys. I'm pleased to be here to kind of represent the payment network as that plumbing that most people don't think about. I'd encourage you guys to think about it kind of just like a transportation network for money. So I mean that's kind of what it is, and people tend to not think about it until it doesn't work right, and then it's a big problem in a hurry. So glad to be here and kind of unpack some of that with you guys. And I would echo what Raj and Joan said. The number, like in the payment network volume, anywhere from 2 to 10 years of e-commerce volume has been shifted forward. And that's kind of a wild number. 10 years is just kind of hard to wrap your head around. And to kind of figure out which end of the spectrum you're actually on, you have to drill down into some of the categories. So, I mean, we're kind of seeing that the watershed shift that you're talking about, certainly in grocery and dry goods, probably to some extent with restaurants in terms of delivery and takeout, and then quite possibly in mass transit, which will probably be near and dear to your heart as well. There may be some shifts where, we don't see that coming back. Certainly the consumer will want an experience at some point in the future, kind of the here and now of COVID at some point will start to fade. But we think, I echo the sentiments that I heard. There'll be a component of people who are participating in e-commerce either for the first time or for the first time in a particular category that will stay. And we'll get into that more probably a little bit later with some of the other questions, but absolutely, completely agree with that.
Thank you. Dave, you want to give us your perspective?
Sure, and thank you again for the invite. It's great to be here with everybody. Certainly agree with my colleagues on the digital acceleration plans for digital transformation. What we see across hundreds of retailers that we work with, it's a minimum of 2 to 3 years acceleration, but Raj and Joan, you said 3 to 5 or even 10 years, and I don't disagree with that. We've seen a rapid acceleration across all of our clients that we work with. And Hani, you talked about a watershed moment, right? Well, let me give you a moment. Here's one that'll kind of grab you. It happened in June of 2020, and it was related to third-party fulfillers. Who would have predicted that a small, savvy startup called Instacart would have actually had a higher percentage of grocery e-com orders fulfilled versus, behemoth Walmart? But that actually happened, right? As crazy as that sounds, Instacart had a 52% share, I believe, in June of 2020, and Walmart had a 28% share, right? How does that happen? That's mind-boggling, right? So you talk about a quantitative stat that is crazy. I mean, there it is, right? And here's kind of a news flash for retailers. I love this phrase, show me you know me or I'll leave, right? Bain Consulting came up with the first part of that phrase, show me you know me, with some research that they've put out just recently at the beginning of this year. I added the or I'll leave part because look, you've got to understand that the patience level of particularly younger shoppers today is like nanotechnology. It's really small and it's fleeting. The last best experience is, the next threshold for minimum acceptance. And this bar continues, to elevate, right? So investment in hyper-personalization will be fundamental for continued success for a lot of the retailers. And data and analytics are super foundational to be able to uncover those insights, right, that can be injected back into the business. And if retailers don't leverage analytics for their benefit, then they'll find shoppers, voting with their fingers, right, on their apps and online, and with their feet in the store. And sometimes that story may not end well, so unfortunately.
Quickly, when your Instacart to Walmart comparison, is that in terms of frequency or number of deliveries or in terms of dollars?
It was in frequency, number of
Okay.
deliveries, yeah.
Because I suspect the order from Walmart is probably going to be higher value, possibly from the order that Instacart may be delivering. But
absolutely could have been. I didn't see that number, but certainly from a percentage standpoint, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to drill a little bit on that first question to get more into categories, I guess. And so Raj, you touched on that as well in terms of the increased touching, not only one type of, one category, but a whole range of categories. And so I've had this theory, if you want to call it that, is that in a sense, the pandemic has pushed everyone one or more notches along the online buying ladder. Okay. And so if you were already a regular e-shopper for some types of common goods, you ordered certain types of dry goods or groceries or whatever before, now you notched up because you're ordering higher value, more unique goods that you would otherwise have, buy in stores, pre-pandemic. And if you had not used e-shopping to any extent before the lockdown, now you turn to it mostly for basics initially. So everybody has gone up one or two steps along that ladder. And so people were spending more, but also buying more categories online. And depending on where you were before, you kind of notched up a little further to go into either more value or more unique categories that otherwise may have sort of relied on an in-store visit. To what extent does this observation apply to your company's experience or what you have seen across various companies? And Raj, perhaps we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think like I said earlier, right, this is a tough category, right? For, historically people have actually grown up by, visiting stores and feeling a furniture, getting a feel for how that will actually fit with the rest of the decor. And they have to have she has to have a sense for the fabric, and the shade, and with different lighting and everything. It's a tough category. And to see that this category is actually accelerated with people now willing to, even buy, sofas online at a rate at which they have historically not, is actually testament to that watershed moment that we were all actually alluding to earlier, right? And I can go into other categories too. Like if you go to branded, let's say branded coffee makers, right? They've always been online for a long time, and we've actually seen acceleration there as well. Because hey, when you actually take the traffic that would have historically gone to a store, and now the stores are actually closed, not just are the stores actually closed, you also left a lot of inventory that was in the stores stranded, because the traditional retail channels never had a way to be able to surface all this inventory for sale to the broader consumer market. And then when that demand actually shifted online, even if there is like a sliver of the original population that would have actually gone to the store, what that actually means is that that's a massive increase in terms of online demand, because some of these categories have historically not been penetrated online as much. That is exactly what we were seeing, is people are willing to take a chance. In fact, like one thing I would actually say, we actually are very, very careful about safety of our customers, like and our staff. So as soon as this is exactly a year ago when all of us actually got this news about the pandemic, and we had to go into our business continuity planning to understand how we're going to actually continue serving our customers. One of the earlier things that we did was we looked at what kind of services we offer the customer. And the customers, if you actually buy large pieces of furniture, they would come with installation, like white glove service, right? They would come inside inside your home. They would actually, unpack the furniture. They would set it up. They would actually make sure it's in the right place. They will take all the waste. They'll move, go out. I mean, in the initial weeks of the pandemic, we had no idea how to even respond to the emerging threat, both for our customers and for our own employees. I mean, we want to keep them safe. So we basically put a lid on many of these high, touch services, like in-room furniture assembly. All of those things would actually stop. But what we saw was that, in spite of those offerings not being there, we would actually see adoption for buying online. So, there are people who would actually, want a 200-pound couch dropped off in their porch, so they can actually disassemble and bring it in themselves. So they were still buying furniture. So that's the acceleration that we're actually talking about. Is even though the services that we have historically been offering was dropped, even speed in the network, which we could actually offer, because there was very tight capacity in transportation markets nationally, we actually saw adoption actually grow. Yeah.
Thank you. So Doug, can you comment on that notching up theory that I've mentioned?
For
Because
sure.
expenditures across a whole range of goods and products.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think it has to do with the starting point of the consumer as well. So you have to overlay some demographics to say, if you've got a Gen Xer, which would be my generation, who has kind of spent the better part of a decade becoming comfortable with PayPal's purchase protection and Amazon's unconditional return policies. And, you know, you've become quite comfortable with fairly high dollar purchases online, but the notion of groceries just kind of doesn't compute in that frame. You know, it's not really a thing until it becomes a necessity. And it's like, well, I have to buy groceries online because my store is going to be really difficult, or I need to help an aging parent with groceries, and this is the way I'm going to do it. So, you know, for that segment of the online community, that dropping down into those lower ticket items and, you know, kind of high bulk kind of low margin, you know, maybe higher ticket, but a lot of items in that higher ticket was a new experience for them. Flip it now to, you know, the 75-year-old whose gym has closed, and they know they need to work out in order to stay healthy. And the very first purchase they may make online could be that Peloton, which is a very high dollar purchase. And, you know, they come straight out of the box and drop thousands of dollars on an online transaction. So really the starting points and the influencers, I think, had a lot to do with it.
It's very interesting. Thank you. Dave, can you comment on this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a personal story here that I think Raj is going to love. You know, prior to the pandemic, my wife and I were renovating our main floor of our home. And as renovations go, if any of you have been through them, you probably know that they get prolonged longer than what you'd like. Hani, you're shaking your head. Yes. So you know this. Everybody is, right? Yeah. So this unfortunately actually extended into COVID, which presented some interesting challenges. But Doug, back to your point, you know, we had purchased a bathroom vanity through Wayfair, and you know, my biggest concern about this was shipping damage. You know, the vanity was awesome. It looked great. We you know, looked at it multiple angles, did all the reviews and everything. And when it arrived, Raj, you're exactly right. The individual who brought it off the truck brought it into our garage, and kind of, you know, that was it. It stopped there, right? Because of security protocol. And I totally get that. I unpacked it with his help, and it was immaculate. There wasn't a scratch on this thing, right? And so the whole experience from start to finish was fantastic, right? And so, you know, Wayfair delivered on its brand promise in spades, right? I actually even have a picture of it right here. I don't know if you can see that, right? But it's awesome, right?
Nice.
And it's the gift that keeps on giving, Raj, because we get compliments from everybody who uses that hallway bathroom. And Joan, you're next. So I'm going to do some work on the back deck this summer, and my wife is already looking at some crate and barrel options for different things for the deck. But one other point I wanted to make here, you know, about a year ago on March 20th, 2020, Raj's company Wayfair, its stock was at 27 bucks. And I looked today at about 2 o'clock Eastern, and it was at 318. Hopefully it went even higher today. But think about that, right? That's an incredible story. And that was all, you know, brought on by largely the pandemic, but other dynamics as well. But I was the beneficiary of looking online, buying a larger item, a much more expensive item than I originally thought I was going to, but I couldn't be happier.
Thank you, Dave. Joan, you are next.
Yeah. Dave, I look forward to purchasing from Crate, and let me know how it goes and how your experience is. Yeah, definitely we have seen customers be more willing to kind of move up the food chain, if that's what you want to call it, to your question. Upholstery in particular has always been the lowest converting category. Not surprisingly, people like to go into the store and sit on sofas, so seeing during the pandemic, as stores were closed, people bought upholstery in ways that we've never seen before. And so that's something that I think now that they've kind of gotten comfortable with it, we haven't seen it subside. And it continues to be something that they're willing to make that purchase online. A new behavior altogether that we saw evolve was design services being conducted virtually. And so that's something where, there's a lot of things that happened or that were accelerated during COVID that we talked about for years, but there just wasn't the adoption there. And so they sounded like good ideas, but customers were just not interested in a lot of things that they got really interested in once they were faced with a lot of time at home and not a lot of other options for doing things in person. And so virtual design services, just FaceTiming with our associates and conducting kind of, that consultation to get help with designing their space through the phone and through Zoom are things that, never saw any adoption from customers before COVID. And now I don't think that will subside either. I think it's something that customers are like, wow, this is super convenient. It's actually better than going into the store because I'm showing you my space. So that's something that not only are they willing to buy more things that they maybe didn't try before, they're trying new behaviors, just like Peloton has seen. Once you've kind of done that, a lot of people will never go back to the gym. Why would you when it's on my schedule? I've got a great workout. I got the best instructor. Similarly, people are discovering that some things are actually better virtually. And I think, so design services is the example that comes to mind for that.
Great, thank you, Joan. So I'm going to go back to you, Doug, because again, you sort of see how the money's flowing, and that tells you a lot about where things are going. So we mentioned that the pandemic introduced many new customers to e-commerce and its convenience. And so what insights can be gleaned from the transactional data, the payment data? What new customer segments adopted online purchasing, and how did purchasing behavior, particularly in store versus online, change at the large omni-channel retail chains and grocers? In other words, those that are offering omni-channel options, are you able from your payment data to sort of detect the kind of shift that have been taking place?
Yeah, for sure. And with some of them, it's a little early in terms of persistence, across some of these categories. But as we've kind of alluded to, the new segments that I think are shaping up, we've already hit on. A lot of these necessity purchasers will become convenience purchasers. They will stay. They came because they had to, but they found that they'll stick with the e-commerce channel over the in-store channel because of that. And this group of new virtual experiencers, I think, and that one's across the demographic spectrum. I mean, once you switch to the virtual experience, as Joan was alluding to, a good number of those will stick. That is going to raise some challenges in, kind of across the spectrum of customers. For someone like Elavon, keep in mind, we service some of the largest airlines in the world, and we also service the smallest of mom and pop businesses. And some of the greatest pain I think we're going to see is in some of those experiences that people just will not go back to. And that will be the gyms, like I mentioned, the nightclubs and restaurants and bars, the entertainment, those kind of higher density entertainment and or experiences where, consumers have already kind of said they're going to be a little more hesitant about taking part in those for a longer period of time. So that, I mean, those are things we're keeping an eye on to see, like, are these guys coming back or are they not? In terms of the larger retailers, like you mentioned, the way we're keeping track of that is what we call through card present and card not present volume. Yeah. So in the card network, you kind of have this, hey, how do we keep track of these things? Did the card show up or not? Was the card not present? And then there's this whole other set of protocols to kind of secure the payments network, which, as most of you guys are aware, is pretty important. So what we're looking at in terms of how those larger retailers are handling this, one, they handled it really well relative to smaller businesses. They're just better equipped to manage kind of a massive process shift like this than your average mom and pop. And a number of them were already down that road. So, Walmart was experimenting with this stuff already. Kroger was already doing curbside pickup. So it was more a matter of just pressing the fast forward button and saying, this thing we were kind of toying with, we got to make it work right now. And they're just better equipped to do that kind of stuff than a smaller merchant. But the way,
go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, are we able to,
the way we're going to, I'm sorry, finish what you're saying. I'm sorry, Hani.
You finished. You're the guest.
So we're looking at how that transaction is actually captured, and that's going to be our tell going forward, which I think is one of your questions as well. Is all we can see in the network is kind of how that transaction comes in, and a number of these retailers realize, like, for the future, that in-store experience is going to have to be contactless. So that infrastructure has kind of gone into overdrive. Combine that with the fact that banks have reissued, I want to say, about 300 million contactless cards in the last year. Put that in the context of, that's almost one card per US citizen. So there's a realization that in order for this in-store experience to be good again, there are going to be a lot of things that need to change in order for people to be comfortable. And for people like grocers who tried to stay open, that was an immediate sort of thing. Like, that has to happen right now. For others, it's on a longer fuse. Longer term, really, it comes down to looking at the payment volume in the network and comparing 2021 to either 2019 or 2020. Which is it going to be? That's kind of how we're looking at it.
Let's say you're a Walmart or a Target, that in pre-pandemic you were 80% in store, 20% online. Mm-hmm. Are we at the reverse? Are we at 20 in store, 80% online? Are we 50-50? Can you quantify that for us?
Yeah, it will vary a lot by retailer. Again, some of them were essential businesses and stayed open throughout. Yeah. Some of them were not and really had no choice.
I'm thinking for those who did stay open.
Yeah, no, it's not going to be anything like 50-50, I don't think. We have some specific retailers who can speak to their experience, but more broadly, the quote unquote card present environment is going to stay fairly resilient, and those who sell in stores will sell in stores. Will a significant chunk of their payment volume move online? Absolutely. Is it going to get to 50-50? I think you will have niche retailers who have an express goal of moving to that for business purposes. But I think that lives separate from the COVID scenario and something they would have been working on over a much longer period of time.
Thank you, Doug. Dave, can you comment on this aspect as well?
Yeah, absolutely can. And I'll kind of provide some commentary about insights we've seen across many retailers. And for example, I want to talk about the BOPUS model, right? The buy online, pick up at store or delivery, right, to home. several retailers had key challenges with the BOPUS model, prior to COVID, and then as soon as COVID hit, it was this huge onslaught, and so they really struggled and had many pain points. I'll just point out a few of them that we saw across some of our key retailers. One, obviously, this is one that's kind of okay, I knew that. That's not something, that's a surprise, Dave, which is out of stocks happened. And more often than not, a lot of out of stocks happened. And that had to deal with the spiky nature of inventory, right? That was kind of all over the place and created havoc. And you saw all the pictures, online and different social sites with empty shelves and things like that. The other one was product replacements. So as a result of some of the out of stocks occurring, then the retailer would provide a product replacement for that product, and joined to that, kind of adjacent to that is margin erosion. So because algorithms perhaps weren't tuned correctly or weren't developed correctly, we saw a lot of retailers take some huge hits on the profit line because the product recommendation wasn't quite correct. They didn't get it right. Maybe erred on the side of let's give the benefit of the doubt to the shopper, and they lost a lot of money, right? So that was a huge issue, and still is as we're coming out of COVID. The last one was around the timing of windows for pickup and delivery. Pre-COVID, it was 2 to 8 hours, right? Very typical. Never spilled over into the next day. During COVID, it was very typical to see 3 to 4 days for pickup. And in one instance with a client in Canada, it was 2 weeks, which was a little bit crazy, right? Now it's back down to normal levels, and this is where again, data analytics plays a really important role. For those who are investing and testing and trialing, they're starting to see improvements, right? And the best way to do this is by creating these sandboxes, right? Where you can experiment with crazy ideas and learn. And fortunately, some of the sandboxes, aren't that expensive to actually, set up and run. So we're seeing a lot of clients kind of invest in that, and proving out some of these hypotheses for these pain points that they've experienced in really difficult times that COVID has brought on.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Joan, I know we don't have you for very long because you have another commitment to go to. I'm going to ask you a slight variant on this question. Again, recognizing that we both have sort of at store and curbside pickup playing a more significant role, say, versus delivery. And of course, Crate and Barrel has stores, all over, in many different states and so on, that have had different policies in terms of reopening and restrictions and so on. So when stores have reopened, did you see customers take advantage of in-store or curbside pickup, that is, purchase online and then pick up either in-store or curbside? And do you see store and curbside pickup as a continuing, growing trend, essentially as a way to accommodate continuing growth for the company, or a product of the current health-aware environment that will probably go away over time once these concerns are alleviated?
Yep, I think it's a great question. We have had buy online, pick up in store as an option for customers for years. I think almost 10 years. We were one of the first to roll it out, especially in our category. But the adoption definitely spiked during COVID, and we adjusted it to make it curbside. It was you had to go into the store, but adjusting it to curbside is something that customers immediately latched onto. And during the holiday season in particular, David was referencing kind of those lead times extending, not just for BOPUS, but also for the shipping times, right? So pick up in store and curbside, we were able to maintain, really quick turnarounds, and that became the fastest way to get your product. And so we saw it, jump to almost 50% of our housewares orders during holiday. Right at peak when customers really wanted their presents, it was your only option that could get it to you that fast, given that the lead times with the carriers and delays with the carriers had extended as much as they did for those months. So then now that the lead times have settled down, we're still seeing big demand for customers. So it is one of those things where it seems that it's something that customers really, it's convenient, it's free, it's easy for customers to kind of do it and save time. And so I don't see it going back down. That was a unique moment in holiday. It's not to that level anymore, but it is something that's higher than it was prior to the pandemic still. And customers will continue, I'm sure.
So do you see geographic variation in these patterns, say urban versus suburban, or more relaxed state versus more restrictive state in terms of the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have not. We've seen its adoption is one that certainly suburban, it's a little easier. We make it as easy as possible. You can pull the car around to the back. So those locations do see a little bit higher than what we see in urban, very, very urban locations. But it's got high adoption kind of across the board in all of our stores. So in that way, not only from the customer perspective, but operationally, we found that the pandemic kind of unleashed the potential of our stores. So just, at a time when you're seeing kind of physical store locations sometimes be a liability, given our footprint, we saw that it really was our secret weapon. And it unleashed kind of something that, in the same way that everybody had talked about some things for years, talking about shipping from store or having mini distribution centers within some of your key locations, that's how we had to function in order to survive, and ended up having a great holiday season because we could leverage those stores as distribution centers, not just for pickup, but to even ship out from some of those locations as well. So I think it's not going to go back. I think it's unlocked some potential, not just from the customer demand side, but also from operationally how we can be more efficient and help the stores to be more productive.
Okay, so Joan, because I know you need to leave, I'm going to ask you the last question before moving with the others. So if the other panelists will excuse me here. So you've indicated that you believe that these trends are pretty much going to stick because of the convenience and so on. Have your views on that sort of changed since, say, last June?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think everyone, the first half of last year, I think we were all on the edge of our seats. We really didn't know what to expect or how to plan, and it's just kind of been something where no one knew kind of when things would open back up. It's taken longer than anyone wanted to believe, and so I think that we are very, very pleasantly surprised that some of these trends seem to be here to stay. It's definitely not what I think anyone expected, but I think it's here to stay.
So are you using any kind of formal techniques to forecast some of these changes, or are you mostly reacting to how things are evolving?
Just honestly, it's just better cross-functional communication. We had to work together in a way that our different departments had to work daily to triage and to communicate and to make sure that we were getting inventory into the right places at the right time to get to be in a position to serve customers and get them product through holiday. And that is a learning that will stick as well. I think that's something that we're using, that just constant communication across our different departments to plan in a way that we didn't necessarily before the pandemic. And that crisis moment created kind of a wartime mentality that helps us to operate a whole lot smoother. And I think that'll stick as well.
Thank you very much, Joan. And again, I know you need to leave, so
thanks very much.
Feel free. Thank you for your time and your insight. Thank you. So we'll continue with our other panelists, and kind of want to ask the same question that I asked Joan. But first, what can you tell us about the future of consumer demand? And we've all been alluding to this. How much of that COVID-related increase is going to stick, and what will it mean for brick and mortar stores ultimately? Because that impacts travel demand in many ways, and that's what we are interested in, that aspect. And I'd like to know if your views have changed on that subject since last June, and then if you can tell us more about the analytics, any of the sort of forecasting techniques that you might be using or recommending to your clients to be able to forecast these changes, or mostly, again, being in a reactive mode, but monitoring very closely these expenditures and these developments. So Raj, we go to you next.
Yeah, sure. Let me actually parse this in two different ways, right? I think the first thing that you're asking about is how do we actually forecast? So we actually applied quite a number of techniques, like not just one. The basics of our forecasting on consumer demand is a machine learning model that has 300 different features in it, and it detects the features that it actually wants to use as well. And that model is constantly learning, and that's coming up with a sense for what the item demand will actually look like, right? That's actually a tough proposition in itself, because we are a marketplace, and coming up with very good demand insights is a tough job. So we got a group of PhDs, econometrics, forecasting, optimization, and that's just core engineers that are building this to help us come up with what will consumer demand look like. So that's one thing. That's an ongoing effort. It's very well invested, and that actually gives us the insight, right? And then what we learned very quickly was that something very unique and unpredictable, based off of historical trends or seasonal patterns or whatever else, is actually happening right now, right? So we can't just trust our those models. So there again, it was actually within the same team, but they began to approach this with forecasting techniques, but using data sources that are actually outside the four walls, right? So you're talking about a COVID heat map. You're talking about are schools open or closed? You're talking about how is competition actually reacting to this? You get insights from outside the four walls. That is, and then you can also learn. You can actually learn quite a bit, because Germany might behave differently than UK, but well, the same thing is going to happen to us in 6 weeks or not, right? Like if a market actually opens up one way, and you see demand for travel, for entertainment, for home goods, for grocery online, all behaving in one way, well, that is something that you can actually carry from that trend from a global market to us. So we were actually looking at global trends to then inform what does it actually mean for because of every the US itself, parts of the country were actually responding differently to the ongoing pandemic in terms of what kinds of regulations they were actually putting. It actually gave us a natural experiment to be able to learn from, right? Okay, here's what is actually happening. So that was also infused. But I would say that, I think Joan actually mentioned something that's very, very critical. Finally, you operate. Like, I think that is the key, is these signals, even when these signals are present, are strong, but some of these signals have never been looked at before. So you have to operate very, very tightly. So we would there are numerous processes that have actually stood up across cross-functional teams, all the way from sourcing in Asia to delivering at home. And the information pathways that would have historically taken weeks, if not months, right, were shortened to hours. That is how you operate. Like you operate at I mean, this is a this is a business that's actually evolving by the hour, because I could very easily have California actually drop in a regulation, and one of my FCs just went from X amount of capacity to Y amount of capacity. Okay, that means completely different way in which we can't actually respond to consumer demand. So being on top of it operationally in a very collaborative, very transparent, extremely fast-moving pace was instrumental. That is that's an organizational skill that would have taken years to mature. We were able to actually get that done in weeks.
Thank you, Raj. I would like to encourage our audience to ask questions. I'm not seeing questions come in through the Q&A, so this is your chance to start sending us questions here. Dave, of course, we're right in Teradata territory here. Could you comment on my last question?
Yeah, sure. First, the part about it was around, what kind of levels are we going to see after COVID. And, prior to COVID, online was anywhere between 13 and 17%, depending on what kind of stat you looked at. It spiked to 30% during COVID. Some companies reported 70% growth, 65% growth in their online e-com business, which was amazing. I think it's going to come back down and hover around 22 to 25%, but it'll continue to grow as the Gen Xers and Gen Zs kind of replace some of the boomers in terms of shopping percentages. I think Raj made a comment that was very insightful around using multiple data sources, not just some of the ones that they have internally that they've used perhaps in the past. So they've kind of opened up the aperture and have looked at, what Raj said is, COVID heat maps or school openings, closings, or some of the, weather data, right? Infusing what we see across a lot of our clients is the ability to infuse more data sets, massive data sets, and apply the analytic rigor with those data sets integrated with internal data is really where the richness comes out in terms of the insights, right? It's kind of like that's where you go find the gold. And we're starting to see that more and more with a lot of clients. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you're going to see, in the near future, and some are already starting this, is how to monetize these massive data sets, right? Some people like to refer to it as data monetization, right? Leveraging both internal, external, for the benefit of the vendor community, of the retailer, itself, and the shoppers, most importantly, right? The consumer. And I'll just give an example that Walmart with their Walmart Plus program, that started about 5 months ago, and just within those 5 months, they've acquired about 7 to 8 million, individuals who have signed up, who are willing to pay $98 per month for that service. And that's great, right? If you do the back of the napkin math, that's $800 million in revenue, recurring revenue. Great, that's fantastic. But the excitement that I have from a data and analytics standpoint is, the gold that's within the insights inside of all of that subscription service and the services. And when you start to unpack that and run advanced analytics against that, that is where it gets very exciting.
Right.
Thank you, Dave. So Doug, you have those kind of data sets. You see it all. What can you tell us about how this might be leveraged for forecasting to start picking up signals, and what conclusions have you reached so far about the stickiness of these patterns that we may be seeing?
Well, similar to the way Raj described it from a forecasting standpoint, we kind of hit a wall in that, hey, like, for example, airlines are a huge segment of our business. And would you really predict that a segment that large of your business would actually go to something approaching zero for a period of time? You know, like that's just not really, not really something that it falls into a scenario planning kind of bucket.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But not necessarily in a, strict financial forecasting kind of bucket. So what we're seeing is the kind of that average account value or average transaction value in some of those areas going up. I'm still in the camp of let's see if it stays there or not. The pollen is starting here in the south, so my voice is kind of coming and going. But beyond that, we kind of have three sets of data, give or take. One that says it in certain industries, did we kind of go down and then set a new kind of a new trajectory, and it's going to stay there but much more depressed? Is it going to go down, ping off the bottom, rocket back up, and kind of get back to somewhere where we thought it should have been in the first place? And then for some of these that have rocketed up, but we'll just keep tracking with that one, or are we going to expect to see it come back down? So those are kind of like three models that we did put on the shelf and then are now doing the, okay, let's watch. And it's back to my previous point, which is 2021 going to look like 2019 or 2020? And what are the deltas between the two to kind of make your choice?
So is anybody doing more behavioral work, I guess? So we're, through our Telemobility UTC, we've been running a tracking survey of a admittedly small sample of individuals, but every 2 weeks we ask them on their purchasing patterns and so on, and we put some hypothetical questions to them to figure out, what may be their ideal patterns and so on. Are any of you kind of doing a little more, I guess, aggressive behavioral type research?
We are with our merchants, Hani, meaning, because, again, that's our customer. So we pay attention to what they're kind of saying, and what they're telling us is that they were not as well prepared for this as they needed to be. And they need to be able to process transactions across a much broader spectrum of use cases than they could previously. And that applies to Walmart, and it applies to, Bob's Tackle Shop down by the lake. Both of those two customers are saying we need to be able to handle a much broader spectrum of transaction environments than we could previously.
So we have a question from Peter Kivestu, who asks, do you have any comment on the customer journey, not just the physical journey, but also shopping behavioral changes in the entire omni-channel path to purchase? Are there any observations on the shopping patterns that are emerging that have been surprising? Doug, Dave, Raj, anybody care to take this question?
Yeah, maybe I can actually go in with an insight here, right? If you actually step back, maybe a little bit of kind of a spiel here, but retail has always been same day, right? Like that's what retail is. People walk into a store and buy something and they walk out. Then when online e-commerce started in the late 90s and early 2000, that kind of speed did not exist outside. So it became like 5 days, 7 days. We all recall the initial, days of e-commerce when it was 5-7 days, and then there's been a continuous acceleration since then of ever increasing speed to customer. I think what we're actually seeing is that there is an acceleration of that ask of the need. across multiple categories, right? It's not just it makes sense in like say pharmacy and grocery consumables, maybe like apparel, food and bev, yes, right? But it's also seeping into every other category at a rate at which they'll actually make it not like, if you sit back, like if you go back like 10 years and you would not have actually forecasted where these things would have been, right? And this is to actually say that there are trends like that we're probably just seeing the first sprouts of, right? And those trends are here to stay, and they will just accelerate, right? They will accelerate at rates at which we have not really fully fathomed what that really means, right? And this is actually a pretty interesting question for us, right? Because then what does this mean to serve her as a consumer on a mobile or on a desktop, right? It's at the end of the day, there is lots of convenience, but the experience is also pretty restrictive when you actually look at something on a 2x5 frame or a desktop frame, right? I think we're beginning to. There are like speed was one example that I actually gave you. I think we have to think through several of those. You obviously cannot actually boil everything down for use as a business, but we have to think through the few fundamental aspects of what is going to likely be sticky and how they will actually accelerate, and what does it actually mean for technology, process, people, physical operations to be able to serve that need. That is that's the profound like for at least for me, it was like, okay, we could say that we got to go find the nuggets, and the only way you're going to actually learn about these nuggets is by investing in those nuggets, right? And say, let's accelerate this and see if they really hold hold true.
Thank you. So Doug, you have the ability, I guess, to get micro level insights in a sense, in terms of individual sort of customer expenditure patterns. Do you have any comments on this question?
Yeah, at the transactional level, one of the trends that we are, I don't know if it's surprising, but it's another one of those kind of accelerators. Is we kind of jokingly refer to it as the millennials finding credit. We've talked a bit about Peloton and their rocket here. Affirm has been a big part of that story for them, which is a lending company. And one of the things that I don't want to say surprised, because it's not like it popped up on us out of nowhere, but the trend for younger consumers towards some of these buy now, pay later concepts is something that's kind of getting a lot of attention in the payment space and in the retail space for sure as well. I kind of jokingly refer to it as the millennials finding credit, because their aversion to credit cards has been well noted, but yet their love of buy now, pay later is also well noted now. So it's kind of one of those topics that I guess it was a little surprising to me, in that it's interesting to us because the payment processing community has kind of built its revenue model on credit card transactions. That's no surprise to retailers. And it's definitely a topic of interest when a new demographic cohort comes along and picks up a credit trend that kind of lives outside that on some level.
Thank you, Doug. Dave, anything you would like to add to this?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of comments. I thought the question from Peter was interesting. There's a lot of ways to unpack that. I want to go back to a comment that Raj made around speed, around scale, and those being real differentiators for his business. We are seeing that with several other retailers where they're they're leveraging analytics at scale, talking about these massive data sets, right? And trying to do it really, really fast to get to those insights, and creating a competitive advantage over their competitive set. So that definitely is something that is occurring on a much more regular basis. It's interesting, new things that have sort of popped up recently is this idea of, we talk about grocery delivery. We talk about, I talked about, Raj, the bathroom vanity, from Wayfair being delivered to my home. Now you can have alcohol delivered to your home, right? Through Instacart. Again, Instacart, I brought that up earlier in the call, but they just signed a deal where you can now, order alcohol and bring it right to your doorstep. But another one that's really interesting is these COVID kitchens that started actually before the pandemic, but accelerated during the pandemic, where you have sort of an amalgamation of a lot of either chefs or companies coming together in these sort of dark stores, if you will, to create really interesting food concepts, which then are either takeout. You can drive up and take out, or you can have them delivered to your home. And it's a fascinating new business model that has emerged just within the last 12 to 24 months, right? And really accelerated as a result of the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from Divya Kantalyan, who's a PhD student working with us in the Telemobility Center. And he's kind of asking the reverse question here because, we've talked about expenditures on things because you couldn't spend on experiences, right? And that has driven e-commerce and so on. And so he's asking, since actually travel, socialization, and so on are inherent social needs, do you see that the balance, I guess the pendulum swinging in the other direction, more towards experiences, travel, and so on? And he mentions that, and if you look at stock prices, for example, which they've alluded to earlier, you could see that there's more interest now in the travel space. So could anybody comment on this?
I'll take a swing at it first, and I'm sure I'll need some support. No, I think the question is a good one, and yes, I do believe that because the pandemic has put a lid on some of the experiential elements that we've been able to enjoy in past years. I think you're going to see an explosion here pretty soon. In fact, this was one of the things that was on my list as kind of a prediction, and that is, pack your sunscreen, your beach chairs, and your umbrellas, right? Because the beaches this summer are going to be packed, and I mean packed. Really brought on by several things. One, if you take a look at the cost of gasoline across the nation, the average by the time summer hits is going to be anywhere between $3 and $4, right? And I think that's actually conservative. You look at the limitation still on international travel, right? That's a bit of a lid that probably won't be lifted by summertime. And then, you take a look at just the pent-up demand that the nation is waiting for to kind of get out. It's like a big pressure valve that's about ready to explode. So, for retailers who can set up some analytical scenario mapping and where they can pre-position product, either online or in stores, particularly those that are close to coastal areas, for beach get-togethers, beach home parties, things like that, they'll benefit in a pretty profound way.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to add to this question? Response?
Yeah, there's definitely pent-up demand for travel. We're hearing that from our hotel and airline customers. They have a vested interest in seeing it that way, frankly. But I mean, I believe it's true. And I'm seeing what Dave is saying is more like a concentric circle. You know, like there was this lockdown that brought it down literally to your house. And people are starting to kind of experiment with this broader circle that reaches, you know, from my perspective in Atlanta, the Gulf Coast of Florida, because it's a very, you know, easy shot down there and back, and you can manage that in conjunction with people starting to kind of do these one hops out to other places for short trips on the airlines. It almost looks like experimentation mode. We'll see how those go, and then they'll add a circle. Do we get back to, you know, my kid and I are going to go to China for the week yet? You know, again, it's test and learn at the consumer level as well.
Thank you. So Raj, I have a question for you from Krishnan Viswanathan with Cambridge Systematics. And he asked, what role do you see for the public sector, you know, state, region, city departments of transportation mainly, in helping your businesses and customers? And what type of transactional relationship are you comfortable with when dealing with these agencies? And I believe he's alluding to whether you might be willing to share data, for example, on where your customers might be, so that a transportation planner can use that information for planning purposes or predicting impacts on traffic, etc.
Yeah, that's actually a very, very interesting question. So we actually partner very closely with the states and the counties and the cities that we operate in, right? And there's a very strong relationship. We learn from them a lot because those local regulations are super important for us to make sure that our operations are are to code, and our employees are safe, and we're able to deliver to our customers. So it's super important for us. So we work very, very closely. And in fact, to the point of, some of our sites are actually are also like, let's say, either they're pilot sites or they are they're the leading sites in terms of collaboration with the local OSHA and the local, county authorities on like emerging practices for reacting to COVID. Like that is so there is very tight, and this tight cooperation actually starts, well in advance. Like when we start citing a building to be built, these buildings are massive, right? And these buildings are going to change. Our fulfillment centers are massive. They're going to change the demographics of the employees that come to work there, and they also change the traffic patterns in the local towns and the local streets. They also change buying patterns. So we actually collaborate with the teams very, very with the cities very closely as we decide on bringing up a site. And then separately, I think there is a second question on like what does it actually mean for broader transportation and logistics networks and stuff. We do partner with other institutions where we actually share data. Has it because let's say because we are actually still small. Like if you take a grand scheme of things in terms of the type of goods that's actually moving across the country or in region or within a market, in comparison to what we would actually move. Like furniture life cycle is about 3 to 7 years. So we are still a small fragment of what is actually happening in transportation. But I do believe that as we go, as more and more of these things actually move online, we will have a bigger role to play even in local transportation. But right now, there is very tight and strong collaboration with the cities and counties where we operate in.
Thank you. So Doug, along the same lines, what is the ability of public agencies to access some of that transaction data that you have in aggregated form?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Payment data tends to be kind of closely
Guarded.
closely guarded.
Yeah.
For sure. But yet there are opportunities for, different parts of the payment network to kind of share blinded data and use it to kind of understand how consumers and businesses are doing what they do.
We can't hear you. We lost you. Oops.
I think we lost Doug's audio, Hani.
All right, so it wasn't, I was concerned that it was from me. Okay, Doug, we lost you, unfortunately, on audio. Still can't hear, sorry. Okay, so there is one more question here from Marco Belcor, and I think I'm gonna address this one. It's a classic question about the long-term effects for online shopping on urban policies, meaning that e-commerce increases vehicle miles traveled, but on the other hand, people may not be going to the store, so there's personal travel reduction. And pre-pandemic, all the research had shown that there is in fact an increase in both. E-commerce produces more delivery trips, but people are still going to the stores. And so we have not really seen kind of a reduction in one because one is increasing. During the pandemic, things may have shifted, but the long-term prognostic, I think, is not very favorable. Again, in terms of e-commerce and shopping. Now, telework may be another story, but strictly from the sort of going to stores to shop and the additional, the additional. Vehicle miles travel for delivery. Pre-pandemic, again, there was no net sort of perceptible reduction, I guess, of in-person travel because you're ordering things. It's like both are increasing, and in some instances, we've seen synergies because you shop online, then you go pick up in store, or you do your search online, then you ultimately go touch and feel and so on. So, but whether the pandemic has changed that relationship remains to be seen, and we'll see what any of our panelists have to say or add about this.
Yeah, I'll add one comment, Hani, and I agree with you. I think, as we move out of COVID, you'll see an increase actually as a result of both. Because if you think about from an experience standpoint, right, the level of interaction, the level of consumer intimacy that we are finding from a fidelity standpoint is getting greater and greater. And the touch points that Wayfair or Crate and Barrel or others, right, other retailers that are developing are continuing to move up the curve in terms of maturity, in terms of, just better experience, right? And that is improving customer sat no matter how you view it, whether it's an NPS score or some other metric. And think about just the human psyche and the human nature of people. I mean, individuals like experiences. They want great experiences. And so we're starting to see those online in e-com have great experiences. And so that's going to continue to elevate and grow. Just as stores, though, are always reinventing themselves, reimagining the art of the possible and the goodness that they can create for someone who physically walks into, a four-wall environment or in a pop-up store that's in an outsized, large parking lot, right? So I tend to think that, you're going to see, from an urban standpoint, unfortunately, probably an increase in traffic.
Okay, thank you. Doug, I think we have you back.
You should. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you now. Yes, thank you. So would you like to go back to the point you were making earlier about sharing some of that payment data? Yeah,
so the card networks are often kind of the best focal point for doing that work. And I know because they don't experience any of the variation of payment processors books of business, so to speak, to where you can kind of generalize across a broader cut of the card network volume. They touch it all in essence. So I mean, that's often where that kind of work gets done is at the card brand network level. That was all I was trying to say before it bailed out.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've reached the almost nearly the end here of our conversation, but I would like to maybe go around one more time and get any final thoughts, closing thoughts from you all on where you see things going and developing, and what maybe concerns you might have or sort of great opportunities that you see. And Raj, we'll start with you.
Oh, sounds good. First of all, Hani and team, really thank you for actually hosting this. It's been a pleasure to be with esteemed colleagues here talking about a topic that is so dear to me personally. And David, thank you for actually being a customer of Wayfair. We hope to serve every vanity delivery the way it actually came to you. Complete, not broken. It's a tough job, and every job well done is something that we are very proud of. In terms of like the overall, we are very bullish. Like this is a trend that has accelerated. I know there was a question on will it revert back? Yes, you're going to see a little bit of deceleration, but the deceleration is going from spending on, let's say, COVID-related categories to travel and entertainment. But online is going to increase. I think that's the key message there. Is like even as demand moves back to other experiential spend categories, you'll actually see that online is going to increase, which is going to drive up online businesses. We're very bullish. We're super excited in this space, and in terms of opportunities, there's massive amounts of opportunities, right? In terms of serving customers with speed, with convenience, with price points that is attractive to her, on assortments that is widely available, that can never be actually found in a brick and mortar setting. So the opportunities are abound, and the challenges are I think we kind of did not touch that much about on the challenges. That capacity is always a challenge, right? You got to understand that these supply chains are long, they're variable. They start like the planning cycles are actually 12 months in advance. So being able to actually get that information flow, the material flow, the financial flow, all done in a robust, scalable manner can unlock value to the supplier, the retailer, and the consumer. So that is what actually excites us the most. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you very much. Dave?
Yeah, I want to go back to a comment that Joan made earlier, and she was precise in her communication when she talked about virtual design services and consultation with associates, and how that has really amped up their ability to serve customers during a difficult pandemic. And I see that as an extension of what Raj, you just talked about, which is personalization, right? Value and convenience. And those three things, if retailers can focus on those three and deliver on those three, there's nothing but bigger upside. I think, that 2021 and over the next couple of years coming out of the pandemic are going to be super exciting for retail. And there's huge upside to gaining share from a wallet, from a stomach, from a mind, right? All of those different areas where you can gain share. Retailers have that opportunity right in front of them, and it's really exciting to be in the retail space and helping clients see that art of the possible and actually apply advanced analytics to solve some of the pain points that get them over that hump or get them over that that next rung on the ladder that they want to climb up to get to a much more mature level. So exciting time. Thank you, Hani and Brett, for the invitation, and for Raj and Doug, and for Joan, who left already. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Dave. Doug, last word.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo that. This has been a wonderful experience and appreciate interacting with you guys, hearing from your different perspectives. I want to underscore that people will want to experience each other, and we're kind of in a moment, but I think businesses and people want to experience the business that they work with. So one of my concerns is that we'll kind of get to this blinders, sort of like everything will go virtual moment. But the way they experience as businesses down the road, those virtual tools will just become parts of it, similar to like the old banking adage is when you add a channel, they'll just use that channel and all the other channels that they want to use. So I don't doubt that when consumers come back to stores, they will continue to use all those other channels as well. And adept retailers will maximize the use of all those channels in order to connect with the customer, including the store. You know, like it'll just become it'll become another channel to manage. I do have some concerns for the small business environment, kind of where we're at right now. That's a huge chunk of our business. And they are, as I've mentioned, less adept at navigating some of these changes, sometimes feel more pain as a result of it. But yet they're a massive economic engine for our country and extremely important to economic growth. So just want to kind of put that out there to the extent that, you know, people can assist with helping small businesses get back on their feet. That is definitely benefits us all. But I'm excited about the opportunities that will come out of this, just as Dave is. It gives us an opportunity to rethink things. We've heard a number of those rethinks, so to speak, on the call, and those are exciting opportunities. So I'm excited about the future, not pessimistic.
Well, thank you all very much for your time today and for sharing your expertise and your insight with us and with our audience. The webinar has been recorded and will be made available through our UTC channel, along with the other virtual roundtables that we've had on e-health and that we've also had on e-learning. So we're going to add this e-commerce impact on demand today to that collection. So for our audience, please check back with our website, and you'll find that information. And please join me again in thanking our speakers, our panelists. We're very grateful to you for your time and your insight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.